you for the introduction, Camilla. So yes, my name is McPartlin. I'm director of something called Somerset House Studios in London, which is a space for experimentation that I've shaped and led since its inception in 2016. Firstly, thank you so much for having me. Like, what an incredible honour it is to be here. And thank you especially to Camilla for the invitation to speak today. So in the last 9 years, get my first slide up, that's us. In the last 9 years, we've supported over 200 artists across disciplines to create, collaborate, and bring bold ideas to life. So from the current Turner Prize winner, Jasleen Kerr, previous Turner Prize winner, Tai Shani, really big art award in the UK, to artists like Lawrence Leck, who work across cinema, gaming, speculative fiction, and artists like Libby Heaney, who's generally regarded to be the first artist in the world to work with quantum computing as a functioning artistic medium. These artists are the engine room for the wider institution of Somerset House, which, if you don't know it, is a huge neoclassical building on the Thames in the centre of London, which is actually, as people have reminded me non-stop since I got here, it's better known for its ice rink. It's what everyone knows it for, big ice skating rink that it has at Christmas, and a courtyard concert series and its cafes. But this engine room of artists is actually driving a new type of programming for the institution, the sort of mothership institution. So as Camilla mentioned, between 60 and 70 artists are resident at any one time. Around 25 to 30% of them identify as working directly with evolving and advanced technologies. I think probably many more engage critically, but don't necessarily explicitly produce work in that field. And crucially, we support them for up to 10 years each. So that, in a UK context, is really unusual for a cultural institution to do that, to have that very long-term view. But for us, it's fundamental, as it allows us to take risk, have depth, and for like genuine collaboration to take root. So it's my first time in India. I'm very fortunate to have had like various super impressive cultural leaders from India come and visit and see our work in London. But it's quite daunting to be asked to make a provocation to a sector I'm only just starting to understand, particularly given Bengalaru's position as the Silicon Valley of India. So I'm just going to speak from my own experience, some of the things I've learned in terms of setting up this artistic ecosystem in London. And I guess maybe worth saying that I myself do not come from, I've worked inside the institution now for over 10 years. I do not come from an institutional background. I come from much more of a independent, entrepreneurial, hustle type background. I've loved seeing how that's like times 10 in Bangalore, it's amazing. But I guess I'm someone who was specifically brought into like quite an old institution to challenge the way that it works. So that's been quite key to what my remit is there. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about that and pose some questions based on what I've learnt and what I'm currently thinking about with our work in the art and tech space. So I was invited to make a provocation on collaboration and innovation, sustainability and ecosystem building. But for me, these four things are like completely intertwined. So I want to start by asking the question, what if an institution could function more like an ecosystem, if it were not based on hierarchies, but instead it was evolving, interdependent, and sometimes unruly, sometimes chaotic? What new forms of collaboration and innovation could emerge if we built institutions around holding uncertainty rather than trying to resolve it? So at the studios, collaboration is something that's very dynamic. It's not something we ask people to do. That kind of never works. But it is something that we design for, and we just sort of let it happen. When we began, we brought together artists who work in radically different ways. So the community has visual artists, filmmakers, dancers, coders, technologists, writers, and we built an infrastructure that encourages both formal and accidental connection. So sometimes that's through a structured residency, or like peer mentoring, something that's quite structured. Often it's a conversation at a party that sparks something in someone's work, or someone meets someone, it's very casual. Everyone arrives at the studios with a different vocabulary, different tools, a different sense of what's urgent. And what makes those collaborations meaningful is that they don't really start from having a shared goal. They're a bunch of individuals just trying to make their way, but they start from a position of shared curiosity. In the context of technology, the idea of designing for collaboration or for encounter, I think, becomes particularly important. In the UK context, most cultural institutions do not have the facilities or technical expertise to directly resource artists and creatives working in this space. Certainly at Somerset House, we don't have advanced tools, we don't have that expertise. So our role, in a way, has become more about to connect people than to provide them with those things. And that often means brokering unlikely alliances and really entering into a relationship where we're learning with the artists. In 2018, we partnered with Google Arts and Culture to launch something called N Dimensions, which was our first ever international residency. It was a residency that was specifically designed to explore machine learning for an artist who was already engaging with machine learning. They worked with the coders in the Google Paris lab. They were based with us in London. They were mentored by one of our artists who was already quite established in the field of computational art. And together we supported them to make a new work. The work was kind of about interspecies intelligence, and maybe to speak in a little bit more detail about that, a GAN was built and it was fed with these texts from the 18th century, which was apparently a seance where people of that time were trying to contact Martian aliens. It was documented, and that was fed into the GAN alongside sounds of real space bacteria, and it created a generative work. At the time, people thought was kind of nuts, and actually now loads of people are making this sort of this type of work. It's become really ubiquitous. More recently, with the Alan Turing Institute, we did a project called Privacy Agency and Trust, which supported 3 international artists to interrogate the ethics of human and non-human interaction, specifically from a non-Western perspective. So one of those works is pictured here. This is by the Saudi-Iranian artist Nouf Al-Fouaja, which went on to win the Lumen Prize for Moving Image in 2023, and also featured the New York Times Documentary Festival. And another one of those works by the Colombian artist Juan Cavelli got a special mention at Ars Electronica this year. So this type of working means building an ecosystem where artists, technologists, and institutions can bring different forms of intelligence to the table and hold tension and learn from each other, but in a way in which every contribution is valued equally. So the first question, my first provocation, is what if collaboration was about creating the conditions for difference, friction, and unpredictability to thrive? And that's my first question of 3. Sorry. So this year at the studios we launched something called N-Space. N-Space in physics terms, I'm sure some people know, number N means infinite possibilities, and that's it's actually an evolution from the original sort of N-Space, N Dimensions residency that we did, but it's about infinite possibility. And it's a workspace and a network that aims to support a diverse range of practitioners and collaborations in the art tech space, which is very focused on process, creative inquiry, and outcomes that don't fit within traditional institutional platforms. Particularly for us, we're about audiences. This is not necessarily going to produce anything for an audience, but we're trying to be okay with that. Its focus is on equitable trans-sector collaboration with the aim of generating novel insights and interventions in emerging socio-technical systems. It's innovation that's not shaped by the remit of any particular sector or partner. So it's a pilot. We've been very fortunate to secure philanthropic funding for this, and we're using the model of a fellowship to scope out its potential. So the first cohort actually includes 2 artists, a curator, an engineer, a lawyer, and a group of academics who will each be supported for 18 months to explore one shared question, which is what does it mean to be governed? What does it mean to govern and to be governed in the age of technology? So none of the fellows have been asked to produce an exhibition or an artwork. Instead, their only task, and they're paid to do this as well, is to stay together in this question, and then they have a shared budget which they have to collectively decide how to spend in order to explore this question. So for us as an institution, this is quite scary. I mean, we say there's no prescribed outcome, but also, what if there's no output? What will we tell the funders? And that is, I'm a bit worried about that, I'll be honest. But instinctively, I think, it's based on what we know works from the wider community model, that creating the structure and the conditions without having to be fully in control is actually, it leads to outcomes that we could not have predicted. And this is innovation that begins without us prescribing what the output should be. It's about inquiry and it's focused on process. So my second provocation, what if innovation was measured not by growth or by product, but by the evolution of a shared ecosystem of ideas? So what alternative power might that hold? So again, it's my first time in India, but in the last couple of days, talking to people about how they work, everyone here is doing like 5 different things. It's like amazing how many hats people wear. And there's a sense that things are kind of emerging organically, informally, through networks, through collectives, through neighborhood spaces. In a micro way, this is sort of an analogy, I suppose, but the model of the studios is premised on bringing 70 different groups or individuals with different ways of working, different perspectives, very different economic models, and just giving them a space to share. And giving that a sense of sort of unity, loose unity, to which can kind of hold all those different ways of working, those different values. So you could argue, in a way, that Somerset House Studios is an umbrella brand for 70 very, very different identities. And then we as an institution are trying to learn what we can understand from that collective intelligence. So another question here might be, how can institutions learn from that informal intelligence? How can we build infrastructure that amplifies it rather than trying to formalize or to contain it? And I would say, as an aside, we've been going for almost 10 years. That does bring opportunity, because I think people are interested in that. They're interested in that very disruptive way of working and having like a critical mass of people who are all thinking and doing things in quite a different way. So this is a picture from my holiday last week, actually, because I needed something to represent ecosystem, and I didn't want to steal something from Google Images. So much like a sustainable arts ecosystem is, of course, very like an ecological one, diverse, interdependent, evolving, regenerative. And sustainability is never something that's static. In our own model, it's always changing, it's always shifting, it's trying to respond to what this collective intelligence is telling us is needed. There's 4 core principles that underpin it, I would say. So the first is longevity. If you give space and long-term support to artists, it allows them to put all their hustle and experimentation into the work instead of their survival, and that's very grounding. That yields a lot. Porosity, we are in collaboration with the artists and trying to understand what they need. We're not telling them what to do. It's a very collaborative relationship between institution and artist. Openness, our model of innovation as an arts organisation that is primarily about delivering things for audience. We're actually very interested in untraditional outcomes that are other from an artwork, other from a performance. Maybe it's a plugin, maybe it's a virus, maybe the outcome is an audience facing. We're really comfortable with that, even though that's not traditionally what our remit is. And it's of course about exchange. So as well as building partnerships with universities, research bodies, tech companies to support the circulation of knowledge, resources and ideas, it's also about international collaboration. For example, our upcoming AI ethics residency with UNESCO, which I will give a slight plug to at the end, talk a bit more about that, but it is about creating flows of knowledge that aim to embed artistic thinking within technological development and to shift the power dynamics in terms of who is contributing to the development and regulation of those technologies. Artistic voices are extremely important at that table. So the health of an ecosystem isn't measured by any one success story. It's really measured by how well everyone can thrive. If we think of an ecosystem not just as a network of relationships, but a living infrastructure, then really experimentation is what keeps it alive. Risk-taking, serendipity, 2 unexpected worlds colliding, things naturally coming to an end. Relationships are living things. So my third question is this: what if we treated experimentation itself as the infrastructure, something to maintain and protect, not treat as though it's temporary or en route to something else? Sustainability in this sense becomes a practice of care, of maintenance and of stewardship, something that extends beyond the studio and into the social fabric of our cities. So I began with this question. What would it look like to hold uncertainty and to embrace the shifting, sometimes chaotic nature of creative ecosystems within our institutional walls? When it comes to technology, I feel like this question is even more urgent. As I was finalising last night what I was going to say, I realised that this is probably the only art and tech presentation you've ever listened to where I haven't talked at all about AR, VR, AI, XR, none of those things. We have commissioned projects in that space, and I'm very happy to talk about that at the table also, but didn't go down that direction, so sorry if I've disappointed anyone, but really happy to talk about that like after this bit. But as an institution, we have a very startup, entrepreneurial, open-minded and non-hierarchical way of working that's allowed for a lot of those types of projects to emerge just by being very open. We do not necessarily have the expertise or facilities to support that ourselves, but we've really focused our energy on building the ecosystem. We live in a moment where innovation is often framed as speed, efficiency, disruption, a race to get to the next version, but artists don't work that way. They work at a very different tempo. They prototype new ways of sensing, feeling, of questioning. They want to break the technology, find its flaws, repurpose it, find a new use for it, challenge it, generally not socialise it on behalf of the tech company. And at the studios, we've really learnt that our role is not to chase the latest tool. So instead, we create spaces where people can think with technology, not just use it. Thinking with technology doesn't necessarily need flashy facilities or expertise. Lots of artists are engaging with these questions without moving into the production space at all. And often, your space and your time are your best asset. So in times of rapid acceleration, artists play an important role in slowing things down, asking what kind of worlds these technologies are building and who gets to participate in that process. So the provocation I will leave you with is this. What if the most radical thing an institution could do in the face of accelerating technology is to move at the speed of reflection and not of production? Thank you again for having me. I'm going to give this a little plug because it would be a shame not to, but I mentioned earlier on in the talk that we are about to launch this collaboration with UNESCO, and Javi is very kindly going to be a selector on the panel for that for us, but that's an opportunity for 3 international artists to work with us and with the UNESCO researchers, so artists whose work is engaging with AI ethics. It's definitely not for artists based in the UK. They get £15,000 each. And all of those works will be presented at Somerset House next year and also at the UNESCO Global Forum on AI in June 2026. I was hoping it would be ready to launch by the time I was here, but there's a slight delay. But if you're interested or you want to share with your networks, you can find us and follow us here, and we should be posting some more information about that in the next couple of weeks. So thank you again for the invitation, and I look forward to speaking to you some more.